We're going to take a look now at what's causing headlines in the French papers. Diptyque Laurent is with us in studio. Diptyque, let's start. I can see it shining out at me. A lot of coverage being given to Emmanuel Macron's trip to Africa.
That's right. It's making a lot of the front pages here in France. The right-wing paper L'Opinion says Macron is playing the youth card. He's, of course, a young president. And his first stop on his inaugural African tour is in Burkina Faso in front of 800 university students. The president wants to modernize the Franco-African relationship and reinforce French influence on the continent. That's what L'Opinion says. Let's be honest, pretty frankly, they're not really hiding his agenda. The French president, as I said, is heading to Burkina Faso first, and this is the front page of Libération, which says it's Africa, Macron's version. His inaugural tour will also take him to the Ivory Coast and Ghana and will target Africa's youth pretty much all over the continent. Libé is wondering if this visit will be a true renewal of ties, as Macron and the Élysée hope, or will it just be smoke and mirrors? Remains to be seen.
Indeed, Libé really saying that he's, focusing on breaking with tradition there on this trip.
Well, Macron has promised to break with tradition, and particularly break with his predecessors, something that his predecessors themselves promised in the past. Nicolas Sarkozy and François Hollande both went to Senegal for their inaugural tour. The Élysée says Macron has chosen Burkina Faso because it doesn't have a good image of France, and he wants to at least start fixing that. Many of those in Burkina Faso are hoping Macron will address in particular the assassination of former President Thomas Sankara in 1987. In particular, they want the president to release classified French documents that could shed light on how he died and who killed him.
Of course, this is his inaugural tour, but he did already make his first foreign trip. Of course, Emmanuel Macron was to Mali a little earlier. However, not everybody is very happy about this current trip that's happening.
Well, not at least not if you read this article from Le Monde. It's a piece that two African philosophers have penned in Le Monde, warning that, I quote, "There's nothing France can offer Africans that Africans can't offer themselves." They accuse Macron of, quote, "easy condescension," and say Africans will just be getting another lesson from yet another French president, a quote, and call France a, quote, "parasitic power whose world status came off the back of Africa. More than the elder generation, young Africans must know that the survival of Africa doesn't depend on France." That's what the writers say in quite an incendiary piece.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Some strong words been written there. Well, let's move on. And there are some articles focusing on how cigarettes and alcohol are affecting French people.
That's right. And in particular, the taxes that are supposedly good for your health. That's what La Croix says on its front page. They're looking at a new hike in the so-called soda tax in France. That's what parliamentarians are discussing today. These increasing taxes on cigarettes, cigarette packets just went up recently, and unhealthy drinks are no doubt being presented as good for the public health, but it's also good for government coffers, La Croix says. As the saying goes, kill two birds with one stone, right?
Does anybody look at the amount of alcohol or cigarettes that the French consume?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because there are two French papers today that are looking at the growing rise of alcoholism and e-cigarettes. Let's look at 20 Minutes, the street paper first, which says, "Drunk, he goes to work" on its front page. They're looking at how 1 in 10 French people admit having an addiction to alcohol, which is rarely seen as a danger or rarely put in the same basket as drugs, and even worse, is often celebrated or widely accepted in the workplace, even in French legislation, which stipulates that all alcohol is banned from the workplace except wine, beer, and cider. Now, Le Parisien is looking at the worrying success of the electronic joint. In particular, certain e-cigarette liquids contain a molecule that's present in cannabis, so they're also worrying about this growing trend.
Okay, so cigarettes, alcohol, all our vices are said to possibly reduce our life, but I believe you have a story that could hold the key to long-lasting life.
It's according to a Swedish study that shows mortality rates dip by 20% among dog owners. So it turns out that having a dog is good for weight problems, tension, and cardiac arrest. But researchers say you should not be adopting a dog just to bring down your blood pressure. But let's end with another story. Speaking of animals, a Japanese football game had a very special guest bring out the ball before the match kicked off. A monkey dressed in the colors of the club, walked out onto the pitch and handed the referee the ball. Now, what I really like is the way 20 Minutes, the street paper, writes this story. They're really sarcastic. They say the monkey was very coordinated. Maybe he should have a spot in a team that's right down the bottom of the Japanese league.
It's cute, but you wonder how the monkey feels about all that. Anyway, Diptyque Laurent for the review of the French papers. Thanks indeed for that. Time for us now to take a very quick break. Back with all the latest updates in just a few minutes. See you then.